So when the Guard Codex comes out, Games Workshop is basically going to have to update the balanced data slate in some form. This does raise the question though that when it does, will the Astra Militarum keep their juicy buffs in the Hammer of the Emperor or Armour of Contempt? Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking Hammer of the Emperor, Armour of Contempt, balanced data slates, and some more juicy leaks. Some really quite big questions for the Guard Codex that could give or take away quite a lot of power. So first up, I think it's a pretty safe bet that Games Workshop will update the balanced data slate around the same sort of time that the Guard Codex drops. In the balanced data slate, there's now really quite a lot of stuff for the Imperial Guard. 2+ saves on Brusses and Baneblades, orders that splash out to other units, Hammer of the Emperor to auto wound on 6s with all shooting, and Armour of Contempt for extra saves on vehicles whenever you shoot at them with something with AP. The reason that they're pretty much guaranteed to have to update it is that some of those rules are just going to be flat out redundant. Say for example, the splash effect orders will now be in the core codex. I've confirmed that with the regimental tactics rule that they previewed, and things like the 2+ save Russes and Baneblades will be folded in as well, so no need for those rules anymore, and they'll need to be removed. As for the timing of this, I guess they'll probably want to wait till when the codex is actually on sale. If they updated it earlier, then technically there'd be a weird gap where the codex wouldn't be functional for the couple of weeks before the new one comes out, and that would be kind of strange. So I'd guess that some sort of balance update is probably going to come on the 25th of November or the week after maybe. I really hope that they don't hold it back until whenever the codex goes out for full release sale, as that could be a way off now. Really the biggest questions for the balanced data slate though are what will happen to their powerful buffing rules, Hammer of the Emperor, Armour of Contempt, and their exemption from the barrage nerf. Really quite big meaningful special rules that the guard might keep or lose. Currently, it looks like people really aren't too sure as to what might happen with Armour of Contempt, but it seems that from a recent Guard leak, we do actually have an answer to the Hammer of the Emperor question and how it might fit in with the new Guard Codex. As with the vast majority of the Guard leaks that have been coming out, these ones are courtesy of Morty and Glory once more. I'll leave a link to the stream in which they were revealed down in the video description, and as always, if there are any budding Guard players out there who haven't found this channel yet, thoroughly recommend it for a whole bunch of in-depth Guard tactics and talking. The interesting last little leak from last night though was this new Born Soldiers rule, which appears to be the new incarnation of Hammer of the Emperor in the new codex. Again, this is a leaks playtester rule, so again there can be some chance that this might have changed by the time that the codex comes out, but to me it does seem a pretty reasonable way to handle it. Games Workshop have confirmed that their regimental trait system usually makes you pick 2 different traits and combine them together to make one big one, but apparently if you don't want to go down that system you could instead choose Born Soldiers, and that just becomes an all-encompassing one that you don't take a second trait for. The name's the same as the old Cadian regimental doctrine, so I guess it's a spiritual successor to the reroll ones to hit if you're stationary. I guess it is in the kind of similar style, seeing as that was also a flat damage boost. In terms of what it actually does, it appears to be a 2-part rule still. The first appears to keep the same sort of rules as the Hammer of the Emperor was before. All your attacks army-wide auto wound the enemy at range on a 6, the same really quite big flat damage buff to the entire faction. It's a particularly big buff to any spammed volume fire, things like lasguns or hotshot lasguns in particular would really like it, and even if you are taking 2 different regimental traits to combine to this one, I do feel like it could be a really solid contender. Shooting is kind of what the Guard likes to do best, and making them just easily better at it just seems like it could be a bit of a no-brainer for some army setups. What's more, apparently the rule is going to be kind of similar to what the Votan had previously. Those auto wounds of 6s to hit get an auto 6 to wound as well, so that could be handy for triggering a few helpful effects within the codex, things like say sniper rifles getting the odd mortal wound or 2. And I believe that the only other previewed one that's kind of meaningful is that hotshot weapon stratagem, the one where you get mortal wounds on 6s. I feel that this is nowhere near as problematic as it was for the Votan though. With the judgment tokens, they were getting an absolute ton of them, not just 1 out of every 6 dice rolls. Plus, their codex was just absolutely stacked with things that had massive meaningful effects on 6s to wound, whereas for the Guard one it's very few and far between. It does kind of make sense that it will be worded this way as well. That was how the Votan were worded, and due to the lag time for sending codexes to printers and things, the Guard book would have certainly been written before they decided to nerf the Votan ability. What's more, Born Heroes also appears to give you a second buff as well. Platoon units get to use their officer's leadership within 6 inches of them. That bit's kind of similar to the old Katachan rule that they had, part of their regimental trait. Seems like another handy buff, to be honest, would certainly help with infantry and things. Morale casualties are definitely something that mass infantry guard are very susceptible to. For me, I feel like that's quite an interesting way of keeping the rule in the codex without just layering it with loads of other buffs and making things a bit overpowered. If this leak is accurate, then it means that you'd be able to use it if you wanted to, or trade it out for different regimental options if that made more sense, which I think is kind of more fun than cutting it out entirely, though I must admit it did feel like a bit of a band-aid patch at the time. Even for shooting armies, there might be some trade-offs there. The auto wounds on 6s are nice, but is it say worth turning down a plus 4-inch range army-wide plus single unit reroll? If you're looking at close range things like melter guns, then maybe not. There's plenty of other good looking traits out there as well, such as vehicles being better on objectives, and mechanised infantry being able to disembark after moving chimeras, but even so I do feel that this could easily compete well against those. Flat extra damage is rarely a bad thing, to be honest, and it seems like it could be great with certain options in the codex, such as the 4 rerolls that you can get with the new Lord Solar, and fish for those 6s for auto wounds if you want to. In any case, this is looking like a solid and powerful rule for the Imperial Guard. If this is right, let me know what you make of it down in the comments, and would you use this over the other regimental doctrines? Otherwise, I thought it would be interesting to explore the idea of Armour of Contempt as well, and I must admit I'm really unsure as to whether or not Games Workshop will keep it for the Guard vehicles or remove it. Just to ask your guys your opinion, I thought that I'd post a channel poll to see what you thought they'd do with it, and I must admit you've given me a really helpful answer here. 1,000 votes counted by the time that I'm recording this video, and it's split exactly 50-50 between keeping Armour of Contempt and losing it. Glad to know that I'm not the only one who thought it seems like a bit of a close call at the moment. I feel like there are reasons to think that they might go either way. First up, for Armour of Contempt on Guard vehicles, that's the ability to worsen the AP by -1 for high AP weapons targeting their tanks. It was introduced in one of the more recent balanced data slates. It wasn't there the first time that Space Marines got Armour of Contempt, for example, and my guess would be that it's almost certainly not going to be present in the actual Guard Codex itself, similar to the way that Chaos Space Marines didn't have it written in theirs. It does mean that it will remain in play in the balanced data slate until Games Workshop does update it, so we will have to just keep our eyes out for when they decide to remove those redundant rules and whether they do anything with Armour of Contempt or leave it as it is. It's pretty crazy that the community is quite so 50-50 on that, and keeping it or losing it will be an absolutely massive power boost or nerf to the Guard Codex. At the moment, I think it's kind of hard to say whether they actually need the additional power buff or not. Until the Codex is out and people have been starting playing proper games with it, it's not really going to be very clear whether Guard are a very strong faction that are dominating 40k or something a bit more mid-tier. I feel like with the rules previews that we've got so far though, that they're not likely to be on the weaker end of the spectrum. I feel like suddenly losing it on a bunch of their vehicles will be a bit of a feel bad for most of the vehicles in the Codex. In the transition from the old Codex to the new, it seems that the leaks are saying that they've gained a few wounds here and there. Say for example, the Lehman Russ has gone up from 12 wounds to 13 wounds, but that's not in any way going to compensate for losing Armour of Contempt, which will make it far more fragile against big anti-tank guns. On the other hand though, Games Workshop have given some very mighty durability stats to some of the heaviest armour about. Say for example, both the Bane Blades and the Rogue Dawn are now toughness 9, and clocking in with a pretty hefty amount of wounds as well, the Bane Blade with a crazy 30, and the Rogue Dawn with 17. When you throw in crazy toughness 9 stats into the mix, it seems like they'd be pretty durable even if they didn't have Armour of Contempt, though I guess from other codexes it hasn't stopped them having a toughness 9 Chaos Land Raider that also gets Armour of Contempt as well. I guess perhaps Chaos Space Marines are the single biggest clue to this one. They had their codex updated and got a fair few powerful new rules, but they kept it, even though it seemed clear that their codex wasn't actually written with Armour of Contempt in mind. There were some things like a Black Legion relic and the Iron Warriors trait that just didn't work with Armour of Contempt, and Games Workshop had to change on the balanced data slate. If they treat Guard in the same way as Chaos were treated, I guess that would imply that they would keep it, though I do think that maybe the two weren't directly comparable. It looks like the original intended Armour of Contempt factions were the Space Marines and Sisters, the power armoured ones, and Guard only got it later in the day, maybe as another desperate bolt-on to actually try and make the Imperial Guard kind of worth it compared with the other 9th edition horrors. Overall, for Armour of Contempt at least, I'd conclude that I am still genuinely uncertain as to whether they get it. If I were to make a guess, then I'd say that they'd probably keep it on the vehicles, at least judging by the Chaos Space Marine example. But for the sake of rules bloat and added on patches, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if they removed it either, particularly if it's looking like Guard forces are going to be one of the strongest armies in 9th edition and Games Workshop think they need reining in. Let me know what you think though. Will Guard keep Armour of Contempt or not, and why? So anyway, hopefully it won't be too long until we actually get the Codex rules in our hands. I'm really looking forward to going over the Codex. It would just be quite nice to have everything pinned down 100% now that we know the vast majority of the details. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see the Codex review and plenty more Guard content. I'm sure we'll have loads to talk about once we do know all the profiles for the units. Finally, if you've been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well. That is what allows me to keep these videos coming quite so regularly, with new content coming out just about every single day. If you have been enjoying quite a lot, then any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early each week, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.